There is something in your kitchen, perhaps in your tea cabinet or your candy jar or your supplement shelf, that could be quietly raising your blood pressure every time you consume it. You think it is harmless. You might even think it is healthy. It has been used for thousands of years in traditional medicine. It tastes pleasant. It appears on lists of natural remedies for stress and digestive complaints. Nothing about it screams danger. And yet, for anyone with elevated blood pressure, for anyone taking certain medications, for anyone whose mineral balance is already precarious, this substance can push you toward cardiovascular risk without any warning. I'm not talking about something exotic or obscure. I am talking about something millions of people consume regularly, often daily, without the slightest awareness that it is affecting their blood pressure, their heart rhythm, their electrolyte balance in ways that can accumulate into serious problems. Before I reveal what this substance is, I need you to understand the mechanism. Because once you understand how it works, you will understand why the danger is real, why certain people are especially vulnerable, and why this information matters for anyone concerned about cardiovascular health. Your body maintains a delicate balance between two minerals that profoundly affect blood pressure: sodium and potassium. These two elements work in opposition and in concert, regulating fluid balance, nerve signaling, muscle contraction, and the electrical activity of your heart. The relationship between them is one of the most fundamental in human physiology. When this relationship is disrupted, when sodium rises relative to potassium, blood pressure increases. The equation is remarkably consistent across populations and has been documented in countless studies. Sodium causes your body to retain water. More sodium in your blood means more fluid in your blood vessels. More fluid in the same space means higher pressure. This is why salt restriction has been a cornerstone of blood pressure management for decades. Reducing sodium intake reduces water retention and thereby reduces pressure. Potassium works in the opposite direction. It helps your kidneys excrete sodium. It relaxes blood vessel walls. It counterbalances the pressure-raising effects of sodium. When potassium is adequate, sodium's impact is moderated. When potassium is deficient, sodium's impact is amplified. The ratio between these minerals matters as much as the absolute amount of either one. Now imagine a substance that simultaneously causes your body to retain sodium while accelerating the loss of potassium. A substance that pushes both sides of this equation in the wrong direction at once. A substance that takes whatever sodium-potassium imbalance you already have and makes it dramatically worse. This is what licorice does, not the artificial licorice flavouring in most American candy, which uses anise rather than actual licorice root. Real licorice. The kind used in traditional medicine. The kind found in herbal teas marketed for soothing effects. The kind sold in supplement capsules for adrenal support. The kind present in authentic European and Middle Eastern confections. The kind that people consume daily, sometimes multiple times daily, believing they are doing something good for themselves. Licorice root contains a compound called deglycyrrhizinated that produces a cascade of hormonal effects with serious cardiovascular implications. Understanding this cascade requires understanding a system in your body that you probably did not know existed: the cortisol protection system. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. It serves essential functions, mobilizing energy, modulating immune response, helping you cope with challenges. But cortisol also has effects that become problematic when the hormone is elevated chronically or acts in the wrong places. Among these effects is sodium retention and potassium excretion. Cortisol makes your kidneys hold on to sodium and release potassium. In acute stress situations, this helps maintain blood pressure and fluid balance. As a chronic pattern, it creates exactly the mineral imbalance that raises blood pressure. Your body has a built-in safeguard against excessive cortisol activity. An enzyme exists in certain tissues whose job is to convert cortisol into an inactive form before it can act on receptors. This enzyme prevents cortisol from acting like aldosterone, the hormone that is actually supposed to regulate sodium and potassium. Without this protective enzyme, cortisol would constantly stimulate sodium retention and potassium loss, even when aldosterone levels were normal. Glycyrrhizin, the active compound in licorice, blocks this protective enzyme. When you consume licorice regularly, you disable your body's safeguard against cortisol's sodium-retaining effects. Cortisol that would normally be inactivated remains active. It binds to receptors that control mineral balance and tells your kidneys to hold sodium and dump potassium. Your body behaves as if you have excess aldosterone, even though aldosterone levels may be perfectly normal. The condition is sometimes called pseudo-hyperaldosteronism, a medical term meaning your body mimics the effects of excess aldosterone without actually having excess aldosterone. The effects are predictable once you understand the mechanism. Blood pressure rises as sodium and water accumulate. Potassium levels fall as the kidneys excrete it inappropriately. The heart, which depends on potassium for proper electrical function, may develop rhythm disturbances. Muscles weaken because they need potassium to contract properly. The entire body shifts toward a state of mineral imbalance that affects cardiovascular, muscular, and neurological function. This is not theoretical. Case reports in medical literature document people hospitalized for dangerously high blood pressure and critically low potassium, eventually traced to regular licorice consumption. These are not people who ate one piece of candy once. These are people who drank several cups of licorice tea daily. People who took licorice supplements for weeks or months. People whose consumption was chronic and cumulative, building toward a crisis that seemed to come from nowhere until the dietary history revealed the cause. The situation is made worse by the evolutionary mismatch between how humans historically ate and how most people eat today. For most of human existence, sodium was scarce and potassium was abundant. Our ancestors ate plant-heavy diets rich in potassium while obtaining minimal sodium from natural foods. The human kidney evolved to retain sodium aggressively because losing it meant losing a rare and precious resource. Potassium conservation was less critical because it was always available. Modern diets invert this equation completely. Processed foods are loaded with sodium. Fresh produce, the primary potassium source, is consumed in inadequate amounts. The average person now ingests far more sodium than ancestral humans encountered while obtaining far less potassium than the diet our physiology expects. The result is a population already shifted towards sodium excess and potassium deficiency, a population already predisposed to the mineral imbalance that raises blood pressure. Into this context enters licorice, pushing an already problematic ratio further in the wrong direction. The sodium retention caused by glycyrrhizin adds to the sodium excess already present from dietary sources. The potassium depletion adds to the potassium deficiency already present from inadequate produce intake. Someone whose mineral balance was already precarious may be tipped into genuinely dangerous territory by regular licorice consumption. The potassium situation deserves special attention because most people dramatically underestimate how deficient they are. The recommended daily intake for potassium is around 4,700 milligrams. Most people consume less than half this amount. Studies suggest that less than 3% of the population meets the potassium target. Deficiency is nearly universal, differing only in degree. Potassium is not just important for blood pressure, it is essential for the electrical stability of your heart. The heart is an electrical organ that generates and conducts impulses through specialized tissue. These electrical signals depend on the proper balance of minerals, including potassium, inside and outside cells. When potassium drops too low, the heart's electrical system becomes unstable. Arrhythmias develop. The heart may beat irregularly, too fast, or in dangerous patterns that impair its pumping function. Potassium also supports muscle contraction throughout the body, enables nerve signal transmission, helps regulate blood sugar by assisting insulin function, and supports the storage of glycogen in muscles and liver. Inadequate potassium affects far more than blood pressure, though the blood pressure effects are among the most immediately dangerous. When someone already deficient in potassium consumes licorice regularly, they may push their levels from mildly inadequate into frankly dangerous. The additional potassium loss caused by glycyrrhizin compounds the dietary deficiency. What was suboptimal becomes pathological. Symptoms that were absent or subtle become pronounced. A situation that was problematic but stable becomes a medical emergency. Certain groups face particular risk from this interaction. People with diagnosed high blood pressure are already managing a condition that responds to mineral balance. Adding a substance that worsens that balance works against everything they are trying to accomplish. Their medications may become less effective. Their condition may worsen despite compliance with treatment. Older adults are more vulnerable because kidney function typically declines with age, making potassium regulation less efficient. The margin between adequate and inadequate narrows. Stresses that younger kidneys might handle without difficulty can tip older kidneys into imbalance. People taking diuretics face compounded risk. Many blood pressure medications are diuretics that increase urine output to reduce fluid volume. Some diuretics also increase potassium loss, a side effect that physicians monitor and sometimes counteract with potassium supplements or potassium-sparing medications. Adding licorice to this situation accelerates potassium loss from a separate pathway, potentially overwhelming the body's ability to maintain adequate levels. Those taking synthetic corticosteroids like prednisone for autoimmune conditions, allergies, or other inflammatory diseases already experience some of the sodium retention and potassium loss effects that licorice would amplify. Adding licorice to corticosteroid treatment layers one mechanism of mineral disruption atop another. Long-term supplement users may be at particular risk because they are often trying to optimize health and may consume licorice preparations daily for extended periods. They may not realize that the same consistency that makes supplementation effective for some purposes makes licorice consumption progressively more dangerous. The effects accumulate with time. What was tolerable initially becomes harmful over weeks and months of daily intake. I want to be clear about what constitutes dangerous consumption versus incidental exposure. A single piece of licorice candy is unlikely to harm anyone. An occasional cup of licorice tea is not going to produce the effects I'm describing. The danger lies in chronic regular consumption, the daily cups of tea, the habitual candy eating, the ongoing supplement use that delivers glycyrrhizin day after day. The dose matters. The duration matters. Someone who drinks 1 cup of licorice tea daily for months is at greater risk than someone who drinks 3 cups on a single day. The cumulative exposure allows the mineral imbalance to develop and deepen. It is not about acute poisoning, but about chronic disruption that eventually produces symptoms. The symptoms, when they develop, can be confusing because they do not obviously point to licorice as the cause. High blood pressure discovered during a routine check, muscle weakness or cramps attributed to aging or exercise, fatigue blamed on stress or poor sleep, heart palpitations sent for cardiac workup. The connection to licorice consumption may not be made because patients do not think to mention it, because doctors do not think to ask about it, because nobody considers that an herbal tea or natural supplement could be responsible. This is why I emphasize the importance of informing healthcare providers about everything you consume, including substances you consider harmless, natural or traditional. When doctors investigate unexplained high blood pressure or low potassium, knowing about licorice use can save time, money, and the risks associated with unnecessary testing or inappropriate treatment. The condition looks like a hormonal disorder, like an adrenal tumor producing excess aldosterone. Without knowing about licorice consumption, a physician might order extensive endocrine workups seeking a disease that does not exist. Now let me place licorice in its proper historical context, because dismissing it entirely would be as much a mistake as ignoring its risks. Licorice has been used medicinally for thousands of years across multiple cultures. It appears in ancient Egyptian, Chinese, Greek, and Indian medical traditions. It has documented effects against ulcers, helping protect and heal the stomach lining. It has antimicrobial properties. It soothes coughs and supports respiratory health. It modulates inflammation. These are real benefits that explain why traditional healers valued it and why modern herbalists continue to recommend it. The problem is not that licorice lacks value. The problem is that its benefits come with risks that become significant under certain conditions: chronic consumption, pre-existing high blood pressure, concurrent medications that affect mineral balance, underlying potassium deficiency. Traditional use occurred in contexts where these risk factors were less prevalent. People ate more potassium-rich foods. They did not take diuretics or corticosteroids. They may not have consumed licorice as consistently as modern supplement users do. The traditional dose and duration may have been self-limiting in ways that modern supplementation is not. The existence of benefits does not negate the existence of risks. Both are real. Both must be considered. Someone without high blood pressure, with adequate potassium intake, using licorice occasionally for a specific purpose, under guidance may experience benefit without significant risk. Someone with high blood pressure, marginal potassium status, using licorice daily for months is courting problems, regardless of the benefits the herb might otherwise provide. For those who want the digestive and immune benefits of licorice without the cardiovascular risks, a solution exists. Deglycyrrhizinated licorice, usually abbreviated DGL, is licorice that has had the glycyrrhizin removed. This processing eliminates the compound that blocks the protective enzyme and disrupts mineral balance. DGL retains many of licorice's soothing effects on the digestive tract, while avoiding the sodium retention and potassium depletion that make regular licorice problematic. DGL is widely available as lozenges, chewable tablets, and capsules. It is commonly recommended for heartburn, ulcers, and gut healing protocols. People who have been using regular licorice for digestive purposes can switch to DGL and maintain the benefits they were seeking without the risks they may not have known they were taking. The availability of DGL makes continued use of regular licorice by people with high blood pressure difficult to justify. A safer alternative exists. The problematic compound can be removed. There is no need to accept the cardiovascular risks when the same traditional remedy can be processed to eliminate them. Let me describe what happens physiologically when licorice consumption stops. The effects of glycyrrhizin are largely reversible once the substance is no longer being consumed. The protective enzyme that was being blocked resumes its function. Cortisol is again converted to its inactive form before acting on mineral receptors. The kidneys stop retaining excess sodium and excreting excess potassium. Blood pressure trends downward as fluid balance normalizes. Potassium levels rise as losses cease and dietary intake replenishes stores. This reversibility is encouraging. It means that someone who has been consuming licorice and experiencing its effects can improve by simply stopping. The damage is not permanent in most cases. The body can restore balance once the disrupting factor is removed. This should be reassuring rather than alarming. Awareness allows action, and action produces improvement. However, severe cases may require more than just cessation. If potassium has dropped to dangerous levels, supplementation or medical intervention may be necessary to restore it quickly enough to prevent cardiac complications. If blood pressure has risen to crisis levels, treatment may be needed while waiting for the effects to reverse. The reversibility is real but may not be instantaneous, and the period of recovery requires attention. I want to step back now and place this specific warning within a broader philosophy about natural remedies and health. Many people drawn to herbal medicine and traditional remedies are seeking alternatives to pharmaceutical drugs, often because they have experienced side effects from medications or because they prefer approaches they perceive as more natural. This preference is understandable and often serves people well. Most herbs are indeed gentler than pharmaceutical drugs. The incidence of serious adverse effects from herbal remedies is far lower than from prescription medications. Herbs generally work through milder mechanisms and produce fewer dramatic side effects. The assumption that natural substances are safer than synthetic ones is broadly, though not universally, correct. But natural does not mean harmless. Nature produces powerful compounds that can have significant physiological effects. Licorice is one example, ephedra is another. St. John's wort interacts with numerous medications. Kava can affect the liver. Comfrey contains compounds that can damage liver tissue. These are all natural substances with real therapeutic effects and real potential for harm under certain circumstances. The proper approach is not to fear all herbs or to dismiss all concerns about them. The proper approach is informed use. Understanding what a substance does, who should avoid it, how it interacts with medications and medical conditions, what doses are appropriate, how long it should be taken. This is the same approach that should be applied to pharmaceutical drugs, and it is equally valid for natural remedies. The licorice warning is not a reason to abandon herbal medicine. It is a reason to practice herbal medicine with the same thoughtfulness you would bring to any therapeutic intervention. Know what you are taking, understand how it works, be aware of who should not take it. Monitor for effects that suggest it is not serving you well, adjust accordingly. Most people who learn about licorice's effects on blood pressure will simply avoid it if they have high blood pressure, or will switch to DGL if they want the benefits without the risks. This is an easy adjustment once the information is available. The tragedy is not the information itself. The tragedy is people remaining unaware, continuing to consume something daily that is quietly worsening their cardiovascular health, perhaps even undermining medications they are taking for the very condition that licorice exacerbates. The sodium-potassium balance that licorice disrupts is something you can address from multiple directions. Beyond avoiding substances that worsen it, you can actively improve it through dietary choices. Increasing potassium intake through fruits and vegetables, particularly leafy greens, bananas, potatoes, tomatoes, and beans, shifts the ratio in the protective direction. Reducing sodium intake by limiting processed foods and avoiding added salt further shifts the ratio. These dietary changes produce benefits whether or not licorice is involved, but they become even more important for anyone who's been consuming licorice regularly and may have accumulated mineral imbalance. If you have been consuming licorice and have high blood pressure, The appropriate step is simple. Stop the licorice. Inform your doctor that you have been consuming it so they can monitor your blood pressure and potassium levels appropriately. If you want to continue using licorice for its other benefits, switch to DGL. Focus on dietary sources of potassium. Allow time for your body to restore balance. If your blood pressure is normal and you consume licorice occasionally, the risk is minimal. This warning is not meant to induce fear in everyone who has ever tasted licorice. It is meant to inform those whose circumstances make regular consumption problematic. Context determines risk. Someone young, healthy, with normal blood pressure, eating adequate potassium, who occasionally enjoys licorice is not in danger. Someone older, hypertensive, on diuretics, with marginal potassium status, drinking licorice tea daily is in danger. The difference lies in the accumulation of risk factors. I've spent time on this topic because it exemplifies a broader pattern in health information. Important warnings get lost in noise. Substances assumed to be safe because they are natural can cause harm under specific circumstances. People make choices based on incomplete information and suffer consequences that were entirely avoidable. The gap between what is known by specialists and what is known by the general public allows preventable harm to occur. Licorice is not uniquely dangerous. It is one example among many of substances that help under some circumstances and harm under others. The lesson is not specific to licorice. The lesson is to ask questions about everything you consume regularly. What does it do? How does it work? Who should avoid it? What are the circumstances that shift it from beneficial to harmful? Your blood pressure responds to everything you put in your body. It responds to sodium and potassium. It responds to hydration and stress. It responds to medications and supplements and herbal teas. Every input contributes to the equation that determines the number on the monitor. Knowing which inputs push the equation in which direction gives you power to influence the outcome. The substance in your kitchen that may be raising your blood pressure is not hidden. It is labelled. It is visible. It is something you chose to consume, perhaps believing it was healthy, perhaps simply enjoying its taste. The information I have shared today allows you to make a different choice if that choice serves you better. That is the purpose of this warning. Not to frighten, but to inform. Not to demonize a useful herb, but to clarify who should avoid it and why. Licorice has served human health for millennia. It will continue to serve those who use it appropriately. But for those whose blood pressure is elevated, for those taking medications that affect mineral balance, for those whose potassium is already inadequate, licorice belongs on the list of substances to avoid. The pleasure of the taste or the appeal of its traditional reputation does not outweigh the real physiological effects that occur when glycyrrhizin enters a vulnerable system. Now you know. The herb that seemed harmless, the tea that seemed soothing, the supplement that seemed supportive, can work against the very health goals you are pursuing, not because it is bad in itself, but because your circumstances make it inappropriate for you. Armed with this understanding, you can make choices that serve your cardiovascular health rather than undermining it. Avoid licorice if your blood pressure is high. Choose DGL if you want the benefits without the risks. Prioritize potassium in your diet. Inform your healthcare providers about everything you consume. Take responsibility for understanding how substances affect your body rather than assuming that natural means safe. This is how informed people navigate health, by understanding mechanisms, by recognizing individual variation, by making choices appropriate to their specific circumstances. The licorice warning is one small piece of this larger practice. Integrate it with everything else you know. Let it inform your choices without defining them, and continue learning, because the more you understand about how your body works, the better equipped you are to make it work well.